Hello, happy people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the third published book in the series, in the Chronicles of Narnia series, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. It's the third published book in the series. It's the fifth book in the series in its republication chronologically, which puts them chronologically. I don't think that that's the right way to read the series, because the problem with that is that The Magician's Nephew, which is the first chronologically which deals with the creation of Narnia, is often read first, but it seems to assume that you already know what Narnia is as you're reading the story. So I do believe that the publication order of this series is better. Now, this story was written, this novel was written in 1950 by C.S. Lewis before the first novel, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, was actually published. So he was really deep into this 7-book series before he knew how much of a hit it was. And I think that's to this series' credit, because what's happening is that C.S. Lewis is invested in the series a lot. He really likes this series. It's one of the most beloved fantasy children's series of all time, and it's been translated into countless languages around the world and read by countless people around the world. But it's clearly one of the most beloved, he had written the second book, Prince Caspian, before he had even sold the first book, because he was that invested in it. And he'd written the third book before the first book he even published, and so he didn't know how much of a hit The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe was going to be. But that's how invested he was in the series, and I like that. I like that he was passionate about it. He's writing a project that he really was loved. It definitely shows in, and so I'm going to be giving a 7 to this novel out of 10. Now, this is a classic. What am I doing? Why am I not rating it higher? If you want to give it a 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 yourself, I'm not stopping it. Right? It is certainly a well-read and a well-beloved sort of a series of stuff. But C.S. Lewis isn't the wordsmith that J.R. Tolkien's Hobbit or Rover and both books were for kids that I've reviewed for you, or J.K. Rowling is, or some of his peers, or some of the other people that have written in this genre, like Ursula K. Le Guin's series Set in Earthsea. And so I do think that when you go and go back to these and read these as an adult in my mid-40s, it doesn't have the wordsmithery that some of the other ones have. I also don't like the asides in this story that happen pretty frequently. Occasionally here and there, there'll be a parenthetical aside that I think it takes you out of the story. And these parenthetical asides are written from the modern day when he was writing this in 1950. And again, I'm not as big a fan of it. This is the only novel in the series that doesn't have a big bad. There are a few smaller bads on some of the islands. And in some islands they're not even any bads at all. To me, I think the central theme in this is very similar to the central theme in J.R. Tolkien's works, which would not be a surprise since they both feature heavily. They were good friends. They were both taught at the same school. They hung out a lot, and they both wrote in the same genres. So it's not a surprise to me that you would see that here, having a very similar theme. The Lord of the Rings is, I think, its key central theme is the theme of temptation, the temptation of evil. That comes about through the possession of, or being near the One Ring. And good characters like Boromir, Frodo himself, who's quite good, Bilbo, these figures who possess or are near the One Ring are ultimately tempted by it in various ways. And some will fall to it, and some will fall to it permanently. So this I think the central theme is temptation, and I think that this book in the Chronicles of Narnia is also, I think, its central theme is about temptation too. It's not about the big bad. It's about these characters. Lucy has to deal with temptation. A new child that's introduced, who's also going to be in the next book, the Silver Chair, is also who's a cousin of Lucy and Edmund, who are now in the first three books of the Chronicles of Narnia, and he's a bully. And he's not a nice guy at all. He's going to deal with some temptation and come the better for it. You have Prince Caspian himself, who was introduced in Prince Caspian, dealing with temptations several times and falling to temptation in one place. His crew has to pull him back and say, nope, that's not appropriate. And one of his crew says, if you keep doing this, we're going to all pull you back and capture you. He's tempted several times from a pool of gold till the end of the novel. And so there are these various temptations that are here. I think that the key big bad in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader is the idea of temptation. It's not Sauron. It's not a Balrog. It's not Saruman. It's not the big bads from the first two novels, the White Witch in the first one, and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Uncle Miraz in the second one, Prince Caspian. So, or in the Silver Chair, which has a clear big bad too. The next book that was written in the series. But so I do think that that's interesting. That this is the only one that I think is pretty interesting. That this feels a little bit different. For those of you who may not be familiar with it or read it back when they were kids and are now reading this review, decades later, the key central idea of the Voyage of the Dawn Treader is that you're having a voyage. Prince Caspian in the novel, Prince Caspian is restored to the throne. Two of the Pevensey children that are in the first two novels return along with their cousin, and they join the voyage mid-voyage, early in its thing. And basically, what's happening is that Prince Caspian has been restored to the throne. He's now King Caspian, and it's 3 years later, and King Caspian has secured the throne. He's launched wars. He's regained territory. He's brought in allies from nearby places. He's bringing in tribute from places and so forth, and reestablished connections. And he is invested in infrastructure that had fallen apart in the years between the first two novels. And in the long years between the first two novels. And so this central idea, then, is that Prince Caspian is now king. And before he became king, the predecessor, King Miraz, his uncle, he had an issue where he did not like people that were against him or good kind of guys and that sort of thing. So he sent 7 lords across the sea to find new territory for Narnia to colonize. He did that suspecting that they would do it out of loyalty to Narnia. But then in addition to it, he wanted them to be lost, to die, to fall off the side of the earth, on the side of the earth rather, the side of Narnia, and to die, or just to be lost past provisions. So he equips these 7 lords that were, and then they head off. And so the idea here is that our king is going to has left the throne under the charge of a regent that we met in book 2, and then he has built a boat called the Dawn Treader, and the Dawn Treader just started in its voyage, and it's early on. It's heading east on a quest to find these 7 people, and he has promised to do it for a year and a day, and thus the quest has started. And then that's kind of the central core theme of it. Now, when I was reading this novel this time, I was kind of reminded of the Odyssey. It kind of felt a little bit like a sailing adventure like the Odyssey. I also was reminded of a Clark Ashton Smith adventure, which is set in Zafik, which is also sort of an odyssey, sailing adventure from point A to point B to point C to point D, and each of the islands has a different sort of theme to it. Maybe it has a small bad that needs to be conquered. Maybe it has a nasty monster that needs to be taken care of. Maybe it has a weird island that has natural laws that are different than the natural laws that are here, those sorts of things. And those things are very similar to things that are in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader that happen. And then another key part of this thing, when I did some research after reading the book last night, is that there's this thing, according to a lot of scholars, has been heavily influenced by Irish mythology as well. There's a lot of Voyage chronicles in the Irish mythology that this feels very similar to. This quest to go explore and head that way. So he's hit the idea of heading east. I also think that there might be some colonial aspects to this as well. Mraz actually specifically says, let's go form colonies as an idea, as a way of getting people to go east. Remember that C.S. Lewis lives in the UK. The UK went east. Vikings went east. France went east. Spain went east. Famously, Portugal went east. A lot of these places went east to explore and then found the Americas, Caribbean, lots of other things too. And that sort of thing was jump started by Spain initially heading east, but although the Vikings had gone east as well, and also certainly there is some argument that there was an Irish presence in the pre-Columbian Americas too. I'm not doing a deep dive into that. I don't whether or not that's actually true. I don't know. But again, this idea of heading east in order to explore, in order to find land and to find people, and to colonize initially, and then to find the colonizers, I think are things that would have made sense to a UK person like C.S. Lewis, sitting in pretty much post-colonial Britain in 1950, although it still has some possessions. Would not have been nearly the big world spanner that it had been during its prime, right? But anyway, you get the ideas. So I think that might have been some of this sort of ideas behind it too. And anyway, this idea of Aslan, of a Christ substitute, gets a heavy hint. If you didn't get it in the first book or second book, for example, in the second book, he's literally prayed to by and that happens here too. Lucy prays to him when she's in distress, and he'll respond and help her out. And Aslan at the end talks to Lucy, and he says that the reason that I brought you to Narnia these times was so that you can spend a little time with me, so that way you can spend a lot more time with me in the real world, in your world, rather, not the real world. And I have a different name there, and you'll need to find out on your own what that name is. And there's actually a place where he'll start as a lamb, and then he'll turn into a lion. So this idea that there is this central sort of Christ-like thesis with Aslan is continued here, and it's even heavier in this book than it was in The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, where he will literally die for Edmund's sins, and then come back and be resurrected when the big bad thinks that they've won. And so this central idea, by killing the Christ-like figure themselves, you see this idea of this Christ-like figure even further in this book. It's pretty heavy. Anyway, so next up is going to be the Silver Chair. I'm about 100 pages into it. It's about 250 pages long, so I'll finish it up probably here in a couple of days. This is pretty fast reading. As a reminder, I did not read this series when I was a kid. I did not owning this series when I was a kid. It was read to me by my dad, because he owned his own copies. So I am familiar with the material. So this is interesting for me because it's literally the first time I've actually read The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, and now then Prince Caspian, and now The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Also an interesting thing to note about The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, when I was doing research on this, and I went over to Wikipedia to start my research on this novel, I typed in The Voyage, and this was actually the first search, which I think suggests this is a heavily searched thing, even on Wikipedia. There are countless song titles, not album titles, movie titles, book titles that begin with Voyage. It's a common title, but when I typed in those two words, this is the first one that comes up, which is pretty interesting to me. So I thought I'd pass that on to you as well. And then, hey, that's it. Have you read or are familiar with the story? Had it read to you, like me, when you were a kid, this novel? If so, what did you think about it? I would be more than happy to talk with you about further in the comments below. If you want to talk about some of the spoilers, I keep my reviews spoiler free. In order to entice somebody. So if you're coming to this, in your mid 40s, and you're like, I've never read this series, but I've heard of it, I'm not going to spoil everything for you. Even although I'm sure that there are people that are coming to this that have read this 4 times, right? They've probably read this probably read this, 5 times as much as I have, right? So that's fine. But again, I try to keep these spoiler free. So if you want to talk about some spoilers in the comments, I would be more than happy to engage you with it further in the comments below. If you like this video, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, hey, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it in watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have a great day.